Good evening, dear developers. Let's help our little body, our offline dinosaur, because they are so tired to show up on many pages with server not found message when we don't have internet connection. Maybe they would like to go to relax with friends, to go out. So let's free our pixel friend from this job, because we can provide offline experience for our Angular applications, but we only have to help to Dino to decide which option to go for. So this is kind of luxury problem, because both methods are really nice. And talking more generally, we'll talk today about how do we create progressive web apps using Angular, using this or that approach. My name is Maxim Salnikov. I dedicate pretty much all my spare time to organizing something or speaking on some events, mostly about Angular or PWA or them both, like today. And I have this picture for a reason. Next week there will be a big announcement for NG Vikings, so stay tuned, follow my Twitter. I really kindly ask you to follow this, because our today's session will contain some code and lots of useful links, and I will post the link to this interactive slide deck right after my session. So webmaxru is my Twitter. What is PWA? In a very simple words, let's take the definition from Mozilla Developer Network. Basically, these are still web applications which use some nice modern APIs from the modern browsers. Why? To deliver the best possible user experience, to delight our customers, users, clients by the features that were never available on the web before. If we mentioned cross-platform, let's briefly list the current situation, what's there. And of course, by running application cross-platform, I mean running this as a native application for this or that platform as a first-class citizen. All the major browsers are there, to some extent at least. Same on mobile platforms. On Android, it will take some time for you to understand, is this a native application written in Java or Kotlin, or this is JavaScript wrapped into PWA. It also works on iOS with some bugs and workarounds, but still the basics are there. On desktops, it's also really nice. Obviously, it's hard to imagine better native place for PWA than Chrome OS, which is like browser-based operating system in general. On Windows, you can install these apps via Microsoft Store or from Chrome, on Linux using Chrome, and very soon the same support will be added in Mac desktop systems. So this will be the real native application. At least platforms will think about this. This level of support gives me permission to call this year, 2018, as a year of PWA. Briefly about advantage we bring to our user by using these interesting technologies. First, and maybe it's something that comes first to our mind when we hear about PWA. Yes, this is all about networking magic, including full offline support for the application. If we have the privilege, this is a privilege, to be online, we can reach out to our users by sending notifications, even if the web application is not running, not running at all, right? But let's don't overuse this powerful possibility. And many other things powered by Service Worker API. So it's the sky is the limit. This is basically a whole new programmable layer between our app and everything else. And we wrap our set of files of JavaScript, index HTMLs and the CSS and images into what we can call app for this or that system by using simple JSON file following web app manifest specification. What about Angular? Of course, as any modern framework, Angular embraces progressive web apps, Angular loves progressive web apps, and there are interesting options for us. How do we do this? So first, mainly we are speaking about service worker when we are talking about development of some apps, right? So we can do everything by our hands. So service worker is a JavaScript file after all. Next, we can use built-in functionality, native in context of Angular, of course, or any kind of third-party libraries. We have also really nice options here. So let's start. Let's first understand what will it take to create minimum viable PWA, like PWA MVP. And I tried a different approach how to build this slide deck because we are going to go through some features of two different approaches, and I ended up with what I call color coding. So all on the blue background will be dedicated to NGSW or Angular Service Worker, and everything on brown will be about Workbox. So remember this, I will test you in a few moments, but before that, let's understand what is PWA MVP. Web app manifest already mentioned this. JSON file to wrap everything to application. App shell, this is special architecture which is responsible for having everything running and working offline. And two more points. So this is like my accumulated checklist. I accumulated from other checklists I found on the web. But the last 2 points, let's say that we create our apps like this by default, right? So it's not directly related to PWA and service worker. This is why we focus on application shell. Let's understand what will it take from us if we want to provide this architecture manually. First, application shell is about UI of our application. So we have to understand which files do we want to take and generate the list of this file, plus calculate some hash sums in a few moments. Why do we need this? Then, on the application start, our service worker is taking control and is populating cache storage. Don't mess this up with HTTP storage. This is totally different things. On all next loads, instead of going to network, service worker takes resources and serves this from this storage. So this is basics of how offline works, how any service worker intended to work. But most likely, we don't want to always serve very initial version of the app, which was like cached on the very first start, right? This is why on the same time, during service worker work, it should go and check if something was updated, and hashes is helping us with doing that. And on the next load, we can serve this updated version. So I have a small comment here. What can we do to improve user experience on that step to show the message that application was updated? We'll stop more detailed on this mechanism in a few minutes, but now let's just group all we listed here to 3 categories. First, everything what we do on build. Second, basically this is what service worker should do for us, and of course we don't want to code it manually. It will take some time and some skills. And third, this is not like must-have in MVP PWA, but we are thinking about better user experience, right? So it's really good to have it like this. Okay, now time for me to test you. What do we show on blue background? Right, Angular Service Worker or NGSW. How do we start? And what's it all about? It's all about automation on all the steps of the flow. Scaffolding, we use schematics. On building, we use power of CLI to generate some things we need. And on serving, NG Service Worker itself. So NGSW is Angular Service Worker. Okay, scaffold. How do we start? Schematics. 1 line of code, and we have all the boring operations done for us. We add registration code, we generate some files, and we enable build support. What do we mean by build support? When we run production build, CLI with this support enabled generates special file for Angular Service Worker. Actually, it's settings file, but in terms of Service Worker, this is a manifest. But again, please don't mess up this manifest and web app manifest. Same kind of name, but totally different goals, right? So you will find this under name of NGSW JSON in your distribution folder. And next, it just takes and copies Angular Service Worker itself from somewhere from NPM modules, and you will find this under name of NGSW worker. So this is step number 1, if you remember our scheme on what happens on build. And step number 2, Angular Service Worker itself does it all for us, all this network magic. You may wonder how this manifest look like. As we architected a list of the files plus their hash sums, and it's built based on configuration file we provide. But actually, when you just apply these schematics, and this is more or less default looking Angular app, you don't have to do anything, because there is something that we call smart defaults, which are good enough to start with. So based on this configuration, Angular CLI generates settings file or manifest file for Angular Service Worker. Now it's time to serve this, and unfortunately, our favorite ng-serve is not a salvation here. Even in production mode, they are too smart, say, to run something that will test Angular Service Worker. But what can we do? We can use any of static development web servers. There are plenty of them, really nice ones. The list is for you. OK, now we are fully ready to have a look on our app. OK, cache is populated. We can check offline button in a few seconds. Here it is. Offline, reload. Yes, that works. So we can say to our offline dyno, please go and take some rest. We don't need you anymore. We will not have server not found pages anymore for our application. Awesome. This was about Angular Service Worker. And now, second time for me to test you. What's here? Workbox, yes. Is the second approach we go through today. And in addition to really cool set of built-in functionality of these features, it has real killer one. And we can have our own service worker extended by these features. Let's have a look how can we achieve this. First, there are 3 working modes of Workbox. I'm not a big fan of having global CLIs from every utility library, so this is not what I go for. Webpack plugin, maybe I'm not convinced enough to do eject of CLI to set up service worker. Third option is a node module. I believe this is the one we are going to use, so let's just install one extra package called Workbox build, and we will need this only on build step. This is why we can safely put it into this, developer dependency. This is the script itself. Let's briefly go through this. First, we get some method from Workbox build library, right? Then, based on some configuration, we inject manifest into something. By manifest, we mean like this. It's very, very similar to what we have in Angular Service Worker, right? It's just a differently formatted list of resources and their hash sums. But where do we inject this? Into our own service worker. So first, again, similar to NGSW, we have some setting to gently pick the only files we need for application shell, and power of globes is for us here. And we inject everything to the file we create ourselves. In my samples, it's SRC service worker, and we will use this today. How this, say, source service worker could look like, as simple as that. So this is absolutely minimal setup of Workbox service worker for providing application shell. First line, we import Workbox itself. By default, we do it using Google CDN, but of course we can download the files and serve everything locally, not a problem. And then we have this empty array, which on inject manifest method will be populated by manifest list we just generated. So what inject manifest does? Two things. First, it builds this array, and second, it just does simple file operations by by replacing empty array with what we just seen. The rest is done by precache and root method of precaching module. So it's fully responsible for downloading files, for serving files, for updating files, for wiping old caches, everything. The last step we have to add to this flow is to add this step, how we run build script to our common build flow. And of course, it's important to do it after. So it will go through the contents of dist folder and generate proper manifest for us. Let's summarize this first point. What we have in NGSW, Angular Service Worker. One-liner to start, right? No movement from our side to integrate, all done for us by these schematics. In most cases, we don't even have to edit something in configuration for MVP PWA for this minimal approach of application shell, everything done for us. On the other hand, Workbox, it still exposes quite convenient tool to build it. And having own service worker is very important. You'll notice this on our next steps. It was bare minimum of PWA, but we forgot about one important UX issue, right? About the one number 3 to illustrate this. Timeline of our application. We deployed version 1, we open in the browser, it's version 1, right? Next, we updated our logotype, fixed some bugs, and deployed version number 2. Our users who opened the version 1 a second ago, or a week ago, or a year ago, will still see version 1 on the first load. This is well-known trade-off of PWA in general, and it's the nature of application shell, because instead of going to the network, we grab the files from cache storage on the very first load. Of course, during this time, when we served everything in the background, we can go and check everything if it was updated. Yes, and on the second refresh or second navigation request, we'll see the updated version after all. But what can we do here is to show this message. I bet you've seen this message on many websites. That means some facts that you visited this website before and that this website was updated after you visited this and before you visited this for the second time. And of course, this is a progressive app. So what can we do in Angular Service Worker? You remember the blue background, Angular Service Worker. We use Angular approach to add some code to support this functionality. We import special service called SW update. We inject it, dependency injection in its classical form, and we listen to observable called available. So all you see is like true Angular style code, and if there is event, we can show this this message, and this way we cover point number 3 of our dream application shell architecture. My hint for you, you can provide version description in this prompt. How to do this? NGSW config.json configuration file. There is optional property called app data, and this is free-form object, so you can add whatever fields you want, change log in my case. And in this available observable, there is an access to the property of this. So instead of showing this default message, we can show something like this. Why not? It could improve user experience. Switch to Workbox, so we'll jump back and forth today. there are two options for you. Number one is simplest to set up with some drawbacks in a few moments about this. It's called broadcast channel. This is modern API of the browsers, and what we do in our very own service worker, for this precaching module, we register corresponding plugin called broadcast update, and what we give here is just the name of the channel we will listen into our application. On our app, we add this event listener, and this is the moment when we can show the prompt that something was updated from precaching module side. Works fine, but at the moment only in two browsers, only in Chrome and Firefox. Hopefully other browsers will implement this API soon, but if you need to inform your users about the new version, we might want to use another approach, where we use service worker lifecycle. To be honest, during MVP PWA, we skipped intentionally one important thing in Workbox part. So we have our application, we have freshly generated service worker by Workbox, but they are disconnected, right? If Angular schematics injects the code for registration for us, in case of Workbox, we have to do it manually. So let's showcase very naive version of this registration, naive but still containing feature detection. First, we can improve this, and second, on this flow, we can inject into some interesting event. So let's list our dream requirements for service worker registration. First, feature detection. Obviously, this is absolutely must-have. We don't want to have console full of red lines in browsers which don't support service workers yet. I was too fast. Next, we have to postpone service worker registration to the moment when everything was loaded and, in the best case, even UI was rendered, to not compete for network and CPU resources with the main thread. And also, on that point, we can hook into event called service worker update when the file of service worker is different and it can update it. And this is the exact point where we might want to show application updated message. Why? So first, most likely, if service worker updated, we updated some code inside service worker itself, right? Some functionality. So we added new cool features, and this is reason quite enough to show the message that app itself was updated. But even if we updated the app itself, I don't know, some main JS bundle, index.html, pictures, all we listed in configuration. The service worker file will be also updated, like it will be by different. Why? You remember, we generate this map of file name and hash and inject it straight to our service worker JS. This is why we can make sure if we updated our our app, if we have different build version in dist folder, service worker will be updated, and we can easily and safely use this event. About easily, if you don't want to go deep into all details of service worker lifecycle, I could recommend you to use another very, very small library, like it's like utility called register service worker, right? Just put it into correct place, and in case of Angular, the safest place to have it is promise resolve from bootstrap module. Why? Because UI is rendered, and this small utility is responsible for the proper registration in terms of wrapping it into onload event. So all resources loaded, all UI is generated. And here we can pass a second optional parameter with callbacks. Some callbacks dedicated to some service worker lifecycle events, and updated is one we need to show up this message. And by the way, this nice utility was created by Evan View, who is a creator of Vue.js. And exactly this approach is used in PWA plugin for Vue.js, and very similar approach used in PWA like plugin for Create React App. So this is well-tested solution. Okay, time to wrap up this chapter. Angular Service Worker. If we need to write some code, we do it in Angular style. And this is benefit, I believe, for us, for developers. We know how to do this. Plus, this interesting option to include version update message also goes for us out of the box without any hassle. On the other hand, Workbox provides this for first two options, and if we go for broadcast update, we can use the same approach to follow updates of other caches, not only what was pre-cached, but also what was changed during runtime. And this is our next chapter, how it goes when we need to manage, when we need to cache and serve some requests outgoing from our app, which are not part of what we call application shell. In most cases, of course, this is related to our API calls, but not limited. So any other calls we do from our app. Angular Service Worker, it's all about two main strategies, about how we configure these strategies. One called freshness, and in other terms, this is network first. When we go try network first, if resource is available, we serve this. If not, we fall back to the cache. Second one called performance, and it works vice versa. So this is cache first approach when we are good enough to test was pre-cached, and I believe this will work mostly for some not so often updated resources, like something for archive. This is why I use this as an example. So yeah, this is JSON configuration. We provide some pattern for some URL and some behavior. Good. My hint here, what do we do if we pre-cached, just imagine some JSONs from, I don't know, our product catalog, and we changed the format after, and we updated our client-side application, we updated our backend. What to do with this old JSON stored somewhere on user's machine? Because most likely the new version of our app, if we change the format, will not be able to parse this. There is a salvation for us called version. Optional parameter you can pass to this data group's property, and if you update it, it's integer. Angular Service Worker will ignore all what was pre-cached before and will start like a fresh life. Workbox, similar approach, but way more flexible. So first, yes, we have strategies, and we have way more strategies in Workbox. Network first, cache first, network only, cache only, stale while revalidate. This is a strategy what we use mainly for application shell. But more interesting that, you see, we do not provide it in the form of JSON. This is more or less like, say, code-based configuration, and it gives us possibility to inject our own plugins into this flow. So we can not only fine-tune some settings, we can provide our own logic for this. And what's our benefit of these two approaches? In Angular, you don't have to code at all to provide this functionality. Plus, this interesting versioning safety switch. Workbox, variety of strategies, so you can pick the one you need, and injecting your own logic, which is very, very important. For example, if you want to provide your own handlers for some features of service workers. Push notifications, very briefly. Angular Service Worker gives us possibility to register it using Angular approach. Again, it's about subscription. Sending we have to do nothing. We just have to follow simple convention called notification property. In our backend, we have to wrap the data to a special field called notification, and that's it. Workbox does not provide anything related to push notifications. This is good and bad, right? So let's start from bad. Of course, we have to write everything ourselves, and in service worker, we have to provide this push event with show notification. But on the other hand, we are free to provide any logic for other parts of notifications API, like notification click and close. This is way more flexible. Let's list everything here. Really great to start with push notifications in Angular Service Worker, both on subscription and especially on sending, like literally have to do nothing. On notification click is going to be released in the next version, so very soon. Workbox, again, full power and flexibility for us. We are at the final point. Let's list all the summaries. NGSW. Really easy to start, one line. Easy to integrate. You have to do nothing to integrate, right? Basic features, you don't have to write code at all. If you have to write the code, you do it in Angular way. So I call this approach add, configure, and configure is optional, and gets what included, right? Workbox, framework-agnostic. So all the knowledge you got about this is applicable to any framework or to no framework at all. Functionality is very rich. We didn't list everything what's included. If we provide configuration, we provide it in a flexible possible way. We can inject a variety of built-in and our custom plugins, and full power of our service worker, which we owns. I call this setup, configure, code a bit, and get what you want. What to use in this or that project? Up to you. I will now give you the question. I hope I inspired you to test both approaches. On that, thank you very much.